The Operating Theatre presents JRR Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings.
In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole full of worms and oozy smells. This was a hobbit hole, and that means good food, a warm hearth, and all the comforts of home, and it was called Bag End. When Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11st birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar, and had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years, ever since his remarkable disappearance and unexpected return. The riches he had brought back from his travels had now become a local legend, and it was popularly believed, whatever the old folks might say, that the hill at Bag End was full of tunnels stuffed with treasure. And if that was not enough for fame, there was also his prolonged vigor to marvel at. Time wore on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins. At 90, he was much the same as at 50. At 99, they began to call him well-preserved, but unchanged would have been nearer the mark. There were some that shook their heads and thought this was too much of a good thing. It seemed unfair that anyone should possess, apparently, perpetual youth, as well as reputedly inexhaustible wealth.
What's this I hear about old Bilbo Baggins having a birthday party? Isn't he getting a bit old for such playing games? He should be setting a decent example for our younger hobbits what might be coming of age in the next decade or two. He should begin to act his age.
The years do seem to pass him by without leaving so much as a mark.
Oh, he'll have plenty of marks and other coins still squirreled away in Bag End, I'll mind. Still, his good fortune will have to be paid for. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it.
A very nice, well-spoken, gentle hobbit is Mr. Bilbo. As I've always said, why, potatoes. He asks me all the time his gardening questions about the growing of roots and like. Pleasant as can be.
Well, you are the best gardener in Hobbiton.
But what about this Frodo that lives with him? Baggins is his name, but he's more than half a brandybuck, they say. Beats me why any Baggins of Hobbiton should go looking for a wife away there at Buckland, where the folks are so queer.
And no wonder they're queer. If they live on the wrong side of the Brandywine River, right again the old forest, that's a dark, bad place, if half the tales be true. The brandybucks are a queer breed, seemingly. They fool about with boats on that big river. That isn't natural. Small wonder that trouble came of it, I say. But be that as it may, Mr. Frodo is as nice a young hobbit as you could wish to meet. Very much like Mr. Bilbo, and in more than looks. After all, his father was a Baggins. A decent, respectable hobbit was Mr. Drogo Baggins. There never was much to tell of him, until he was drowned.
Drowned?
Well, so they say. You see, Mr. Drogo, he married poor Miss Primula Brandybuck. She was our Mr. Bilbo's first cousin on the mother's side. Her mother being the youngest of old Took's daughters, and Mr. Drogo was his second cousin. So, Mr. Frodo is his first and second cousin, once removed either way, as the saying is, if you follow me. Mr. Drogo was staying at Brandy Hall with his father-in-law, old Master Gorbadoc, as he often did after his marriage, him being partial to his victuals, and old Gorbadoc keeping a mighty generous table. And he went out boating on the Brandywine River, and he and his wife were drowned. Poor Mr. Frodo, only a child and all.
I heard they went on the water after dinner in the moonlight, and it was Drogo's weight that sunk the boat.
And I heard she pushed him in, and he pulled her in after him.
You shouldn't listen to all you hear, Sandyman Miller. There isn't no call to go talking of pushing and pulling. Boats are quite tricky enough for those that sit still without looking for further cause of trouble. Anyway, there was this Mr. Frodo, left an orphan, stranded, as you might say, among those queer Bucklanders, being brought up anyhow in Brandy Hall. A regular warren, by all accounts. Old Master Gorbadoc never had fewer than a couple of 100 relations in the place. Mr. Bilbo never did a kinder deed than when he brought the lad back to live among decent folk.
Mr. Baggins was generous with his money. Most people were willing to forgive him his oddities and his good fortune. He remained on visiting terms with his relatives, except, of course, the Sackville Bagginses, and he made many devoted admirers among the hobbits of poor and unimportant families. But he had no close friends until some of his younger cousins began to grow up. The eldest of these, and Bilbo's favorite, was young Frodo Baggins. When Bilbo was 99, he adopted Frodo as his heir and brought him to live at Bag End, and the hopes of the Sackville Bagginses were finally dashed. Bilbo and Frodo happened to have the same birthday, September 22nd.
You had better come live here, Frodo, my lad, and then we can celebrate our birthday parties comfortably together.
Each year, the Bagginses had given very lively combined birthday parties at Bag End. But now it was understood that something quite exceptional was being planned for that autumn. Bilbo was going to be 111, 111, a rather curious number and a very respectable age for a hobbit. Old Took himself had only reached 130. And Frodo was going to be 33, 3-3, an important number, the date of his coming of age.
It has to be a nasty knock for those Sackville Bagginses. They thought they were going to get Bag End that time when he went off and was thought to be dead. And then he comes back and orders them off. And he goes on living and living, never looking a day older, bless him. And suddenly, he produces an heir and has all the papers made out proper. Sackville Bagginses won't never see the inside of Bag End now, or at least I hope not.
There's a tidy bit of money tucked away up there, I hear tell. All the top of your hill is full of tunnels packed with chests of gold and silver and jewels, by what I've heard.
Well, then you've heard more than I can speak to. I know nothing about jewels. Mr. Bilbo is free with his money, and there seems to be no lack of it. But I know of no tunnel making. I saw Mr. Bilbo when he came back, a matter of 60 years ago, when I was a lad. Mr. Bilbo comes up the hill with a pony and some mighty big bags, and a couple of chests. I don't doubt they were mostly full of treasure he had picked up in foreign parts, where there be mountains of gold, they say. But there wasn't enough to fill tunnels. My lad Sam will know more about that. He's in and out of Bag End. Crazy about stories of the old days, he is. And he listens to all Mr. Bilbo's tales. Mr. Bilbo has learned him his letters, and meaning no harm, mark you. I hope no harm will come of it. Elves and dragons, I says to him. Cabbages and potatoes are better for me and you. Don't go getting mixed up in the business of your betters, or you'll land in trouble too big for you. I says to him, I might say it to others.
Ah, but he's likely enough been adding to what he brought at first. He's often away from home. And look at the outlandish folk that visit him. Dwarves coming at night. And that old wandering conjurer Gandalf and all. You can say what you like, Gaffer, but Baggins a queer place. And its folk are queerer.
And you can say what you like about what you know no more of than you do boating, Mr. Sandyman. If that's being queer, we could do with a bit more queerness in these parts. There's some not far away that wouldn't offer a pint of beer to a friend. They lived in a hole with golden walls. They do things proper at Bag End. Our Sam says that everyone's going to be invited to the party. There's going to be presents, mark you, presents for all. As very much as is.
At the end of the second week in September, a cart came in through Baywater from the direction of Brandywine Bridge in broad daylight. An old man was driving it all alone. He wore a tall, pointed blue hat, a long gray cloak, and a silver scarf. He had a long white beard and bushy eyebrows that stuck out beyond the brim of his hat. Small hobbit children ran after the cart, all through Hobbiton and right up the hill. It had a cargo of fireworks, as they rightly guessed. There were great bundles of fireworks of all sorts and shapes, each labeled with a large red G and the elf rune that was Gandalf's mark, of course. And the old man was Gandalf the Wizard, whose fame in the Shire was due mainly to his skill with fires, smokes, and lights. His real business was far more difficult and dangerous, but the Shire folk knew nothing about it. To them, he was just one of the attractions at the upcoming party.
Run away now. You'll get plenty when the time comes.
Gandalf.
Bilbo, my old friend.
Well, come inside. Come inside.
How bright your garden looks.
Yes, well, that is mostly due to Master Hamfest and his son Sam. I am very fond indeed of it, though, and of all the dear old Shire. But I think I need a holiday.
You mean to go on with your plan, then?
I do. I made up my mind months ago, and I haven't changed it.
Very well. It is no good saying any more. Stick to your plan, your whole plan. Mind, and I hope it will turn out for the best, for you and for all of us.
I don't expect I shall return. In fact, I don't mean to. And I've made all arrangements. I am old, Gandalf. I don't look it, but I am beginning to feel it in my heart of hearts. Well preserved indeed. Why, I feel all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean. Like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. That can't be right. I need a change, or something.
No, it doesn't seem right. No. After all, I believe your plan is probably the best.
Well, I've made up my mind anyway. I want to see mountains again, Gandalf. Mountains! And then find somewhere where I can rest. In peace and quiet. Without a lot of relatives prying around. And a string of confounded visitors hanging on the bell. I might find somewhere where I can finish my book. I have thought of a nice ending for it. And he lived happily ever after to the end of his days.
I hope he will.
He would come with me, of course, if I asked him. But he does not really want to, yet. I want to see the wild country again before I die. But he is still in love with the Shire, with woods and fields and little rivers. He ought to be comfortable here. I am leaving everything to him, except a few oddments. I hope he will be happy when he gets used to being on his own. It's time he was his own master now.
Everything? What about the ring?
Yes, including the ring. Really, Gandalf, you needn't worry. Let me enjoy this, won't you?
Bilbo Baggins called it a party, but it was really a variety of entertainments rolled into one. Practically everybody living near was invited. A very few were overlooked by accident, but as they turned up all the same, that did not matter. Bilbo gave away presents to all and sundry. Hobbits give presents to other people on their own birthdays. Not very expensive ones as a rule, and not so lavishly as on this occasion, but it was not a bad system. On this occasion, the presents were unusually big. There were toys the like of which they had never seen before, all beautiful and some obviously magical. There was a specially large pavilion, so big that the tree that grew in the field was right inside it. Lanterns were hung on all its branches. More promising still to the Hobbit's mind, an enormous open-air kitchen was erected in the north corner of the field. The fireworks were by Gandalf. There were rockets like a flight of scintillating birds singing with sweet voices. There were green trees with trunks of dark smoke. Their leaves opened like a whole spring unfolding in a moment, and their shining branches dropped glowing flowers down upon the astonished hobbits, disappearing with a sweet scent just before they touched their upturned faces.
That's the signal for supper. My dear people, my dear Bagginses and Boffins, and my dear Tooks and Brandybucks and Grubs and Chubs and Burlers and Hornblowers and Bulgers, Gray Skirtles, Good Bodies, Blockhouses and Proudfoots. Proudfoots. Also, my good Sackville Bagginses that I welcome back at last to Bag End. Today is my 111th birthday. I am 111 today. I hope you are all enjoying yourselves as much as I am. No! I shall not keep you long. I have called you all together for a purpose. First of all, to tell you that I am immensely fond of you all, and that 111 years is too short a time to live among such excellent and admirable hobbits. I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
What does he mean by that?
It is, of course, also the birthday of my heir and nephew, Frodo. He comes of age and into his inheritance today. Together we score 144. Your numbers were chosen to fit this remarkable total. One gross, if I may use the expression. One gross indeed. Vulgar expression, as if you were goods in a package. Forgive me. Thank you very much for coming to my little party. Thirdly and finally, I wish to make an announcement. I regret to announce that, though, as I said, 11 years is far too short a time to spend among you, this is the end. I am going. I am leaving now. Goodbye.
You see him? This is in bad taste. He's put me off my meal. Where's Mad Baggins? I can't believe it.
There's something fishy in this. I believe that Mad Baggins is off again. Silly old fool. But why worry? He hasn't taken the victuals with him.
The second disappearance of Mr. Bilbo Baggins was discussed in Hobbiton, and indeed all over the Shire, for a year and a day, and was remembered much longer than that. At the time, it was generally agreed that vanishing like that was in very bad taste, and more food and drink were needed to cure the guests of shock and annoyance. Over time, it became a fireside story for young hobbits, and eventually, Mad Baggins, who used to vanish with a bang and a flash and reappear with bags of jewels and gold, became a favorite character of legend and lived on long after all the true events were forgotten. Frodo lived alone, as Bilbo had done, but he had a good many friends, particularly Frederigar Bolger, Merry Doc Brandybuck, and Peregrine Took. Frodo went tramping over the Shire with them, but more often he wandered by himself. And to the amazement of sensible folk, he was sometimes seen far from home, walking in the hills and woods under the starlight. Merry and Pippin suspected that he visited the elves at times, as Bilbo had done. As time went on, people began to notice that Frodo also showed signs of good preservation. Outwardly, he retained the appearance of a robust and energetic hobbit just out of his tweens. Some folk have all the luck, they said, but it was not until Frodo approached the usually more sober age of 50 that they began to think it queer.
Queer things you do here these days, to be sure.
Ah, you do if you listen. But I can hear fireside tales and children's stories at home if I want to.
No doubt you can, and I dare say there's more truth in some of them than you reckon. What about these tree men, these giants, as you might call them? They do say that one bigger than a tree was seen up way beyond the North Moors not long back.
Who's they?
My cousin Hal, for one. He works for Mr. Boffin at Overhill and goes up to the North Farthing for the hunting. He saw one.
Says he did. Your Hal's always saying he's seen things. Maybe he sees things ain't there.
But this one was as big as an elm tree and walking 7 yards to a stride if it was an inch.
Then I bet it wasn't an inch. What he saw was an elm tree, as like as not.
But this one was walking, I tell you, and there ain't no elm trees on the North Moors.
Then Hal can't have seen one.
You can't deny that other besides our Halfasts have seen queer folks crossing the Shire. Crossing it, mind you, there are more that are turned back at the borders. The bounders have never been so busy before. And I've heard tell that elves are moving west. They do say they're going to the harbors out way beyond the White Towers. They're sailing over the sea. They're going into the west and leaving us.
Well, that isn't anything new if you believe the old tales. And I don't see what it matters to me or you. Let them sail. But I'll warrant you haven't seen them doing it. Nor anyone else in the Shire.
I don't know. Master Frodo that I work for gets news from them on occasion.
Oh, old Bilbo was cracked. Frodo's cracking. If that's where you get your news from, you'll never want for moonshine. Well, friends, I'm off. Your good health.
Good night, you all.
Very enjoyable.
Good night. Good night. Safe travels, everyone. Good night.
See you next time.
Good night.
Gandalf! I've not seen you in 10 years.
You look the same as ever, Frodo.
You look weary, Gandalf. Come in, come in. Last night, you began to tell me strange things about my ring, Gandalf, and then you stopped. Because you said such matters were best left until daylight. Don't you think you'd better finish now? You say the ring is dangerous. Far more dangerous than I guessed. In what way?
In Eregion, long ago, many elven rings were made. Magic rings, as you call them. And they were, of course, of various kinds. Some were more potent, some less. But the great rings, the rings of power, they were perilous. A mortal, Frodo, keeps one of the great rings, does not die, but he does not grow or obtain more life. He merely continues until at last every minute is a weariness. He fades and walks in the twilight under the eye of the dark power that rules the rings.
But there wasn't any permanent harm done, was there? Bilbo would get all right in time, wouldn't he?
He felt better at once. Hobbits can be soft as butter and yet sometimes as tough as old tree roots. I think it likely that some would resist the rings far longer than most of the wise would believe. I don't think you need worry about it, Bilbo. No, Frodo, it is for you that I feel responsible.
Me? How so?
Did Bilbo ever tell you of his full conversation with the dragon Smaug all those years ago? The clues were there, if he wanted to hear them.
Oh, great and marvelous and terrible Smaug, I wished only to gaze upon your immensity and see for myself if the tales of your awful splendor were true.
And are they barrow rider and thief in the dark?
You exceed the rumors admirably and chillingly, magnificent Smaug.
Indeed I do. Thorin Oakenshield was wise to send you here in his stead. He has found an ambassador with more wit and courtesy than he or his ragtag band of dwarves can muster.
Dwarves? I don't follow. I've come alone of my own accord to see your fearsome eminence.
You cannot deceive me, thief. I smell the reek of dwarf. And something else as well. You carry something dark with you. Dark and powerful. I smell gold. Something more. Yes. You must have done something very wicked to come by such a trinket.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Do you not? No, of course not. It is not for mercenary burglars to know the value of what they steal. Perhaps even Oakenshield does not know. This is most excellent. I am amused to know that you sit naked and blind in the gathering dark, your very scent summoning a terror that I can only imitate poorly.
There is no greater danger in all the realms of Middle-earth than Smaug, the calamitous, who dwells in the lonely mountain.
Now you speak foolishly of things you do not perceive nor understand. I may even part with such an item in time to see it wielded in the hand of a master. But come, your flattery begins to bore me. You have descended to my lair for other reasons, have you not, Barrel Rider?
Vague hints, and Bilbo did not need them. I was not sure of myself when I was last here, but the time has come to speak. Give me the ring for a moment. Can you see any markings on it?
No, there are none. It's quite plain. It never shows any scratch or sign of wear.
Well then, look closely.
No, Gandalf! You'll damage it!
Please! Hold out your hand. You'll find the ring is quite cool to the touch. Now, can you see any markings on it?
No, it's perfect. Wait. Yes, fine lines are appearing. Finer than pen strokes. On the outside of the band, they're shining so bright. I can't read the letters, Gandalf.
In the beginning, Eru Ilúvatar brought forth the Valar and the Maiar and filled them with the flame imperishable. He shared the first thought with them in the form of music. Each of the Valar and the Maiar received their own theme, and Eru Ilúvatar listened as they expanded upon the melodies. And so it was that, in time, Eru Ilúvatar taught the Valar and the Maiar the greatest of all songs, and made them sing in harmony with each other. And the song brought forth Ea, everything. Then the Valar and the Maiar went into Ea, and they shaped Arda, the earth, from the song. But among the Valar who were drawn to dwell in Arda, there was one, Melkor, who did not want to sing the harmonies of Ea, but wished to create his own music instead. His very thought sowed disharmony and discontent in Arda, and where the company of Valar brought forth great beauty into the world, and shaped lamps of the purest light, Melkor schemed to destroy the lamps and bring darkness upon the world. And when the other Valar grew two immense and living trees of silver and golden light, Melkor ruined them again. And in the course of time, as the Valar welcomed and delighted in the animals and plants that Yavanna created, and as they marveled at the children of Eru Ilúvatar, elves and men, even then, in secret, Melkor invented terrible demons of fire and shadow, dragons whose wings beat the air into a gale with breath to set it aflame, hideous spiders as large as boulders, but swift, cunning, and cruel. Hordes of pitiless orcs teemed the world. All manner of evil flows from Melkor's will, for evil is his creation, the only melody unclaimed in the great song of Eru Ilúvatar. And Melkor's most wicked creation is Sauron, a proud and beautiful Maiar who is tempted and corrupted by Melkor's dark visions, and will, in time, become a lord of darkness himself. But in the early days, Sauron was fair and clever, and befriended the Eldar, the elves, first children of Eru Ilúvatar, walking among them, gaining their trust, learning their ways. And so, 2 long ages of the world passed. Great kingdoms of elves and men rose and flourished and fell in the immensity of time. Melkor was at last banished from Arda. But his servant Sauron remained. His deceit of the races of Middle-earth was more elaborate than his master's, and when he taught them to make the rings of power, he himself made one, which could bend the will of the others. One ring, which held the power of Sauron's malice, to rule the world forever. But then his one ring was lost to him. Little or none of this was known to the halflings, who dwell in their own peaceful dells and lush valleys, and next to babbling bywaters in a small corner of a long-forgotten kingdom in the autumn of the 3rd age of Middle-earth.
No, you cannot read the script, Frodo. There are few who can. The letters are elvish, of an ancient mode, but the language is that of Mordor, which I will not utter here. This, in the common tongue, is what is said close enough. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them.
In that episode, Andree was the narrator. Frank Wildingway was Bilbo. Adam Fogelson was Gandalf. Joseph Ecklund was Frodo. Ian Baird was Sam. Steve Bertelsen was Old Noakes. Gavin Pritchard was Gaffer Gamgee, Sandyman the Miller, and Smaug the Dragon. Music by Gavin Pritchard. Produced by the Operating Theatre.